This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-rounder platform for creating a beautiful website without all the extra stress. For the first 2 decades of your life, you are spoon-fed an education. Teachers set your lessons and their word is final. And whatever curriculum the state gives you, you have to damn well follow it. And if your curiosity goes beyond that, it's almost pointless to follow it because it's not going to be on the exam. And sure, there's some room to mix it up a bit, but in general, traditional education limits your freedom. But once you leave school or university, you now have this sudden freedom to learn whatever you want. There's no assignments, no teachers, no homework, no exams, none of this stuff. And there's no $200 textbooks, which is always nice. That's exactly how I felt. But before I got too comfortable, I made a dark discovery. It wasn't the pretty image I had imagined. I had no idea what to do. I was lost. Because I was used to being guided in my education, I had no idea how to do it by myself. So now that I was alone and with this new independence, I was shooting in the dark. The books I read made no sense. I just picked whatever crap was on my shelf, and whenever I sat down to learn, there was no intention behind it. And what used to be this fun and exciting hobby was now a meaningless skip with nothing to show for along the way. Maybe you felt the same. Maybe, like me, you want a clear structure in your learning, a path that you can follow to feel a sense of progress and accomplishment along the way. I think it's part of the reason why online courses are so popular online. People mock them all the time, but I like the organization they offer. But what if instead of just buying a course from someone or going back to school, you could make yourself a curriculum? And by this I mean a reading plan, one that's made by you to serve you better than anyone else can. That is the peak of independence. And for someone like you who already likes to learn in their spare time, it's such a freeing feeling to have that agency in what you do. A reading plan is a series of books that you read through in order to achieve a specific goal. And unlike the rigid curriculums of school, you make the rules. You can make a reading plan that has 5 books or 100. And you can choose literally any topic, no matter how obscure or specific. You could design a plan that makes you an expert in the religion of Mississippi's Choctaw Indians. It can be that specific. Or you could zoom out a bit and say, maybe I just want a basic understanding of Native American society. And there's your reading plan. It doesn't have to be precise and really deep. Sometimes all you want is a basic understanding. It's all up to you. So before I get carried away in the details, because I love these, let's just take it from step 1. You can choose between 2 rough approaches to this. Do you pick a reading plan that's already made, or do you make your own? Let's look at the first approach. Now, immediately you might think, if we pick someone else's reading plan, surely we're then imposing a curriculum on ourselves. Doesn't that defeat the point? And I get that, but it's not quite the same. Sometimes you just can't be asked to do the research yourself, which is totally fair. And if you see that someone else has made a reading plan that you like, just steal it. And of course, you're free to adjust it, to add books, to remove books, or to just base your own model off of it. That's the approach I'm using now, actually. I'm following roughly the Great Works of Western Traditionalist, which is a famous collection made by some really smart dudes over at the University of Chicago. I want to explore the best of the best, the works that European society is built upon. So it makes sense to me to just take that one. Now, of course, it's not all I read, and I will supplement it with books if I want to, but the point is it gives me that rough direction. But look, that's just me, and everyone's different. So in that case, where would you browse for these lists? Well, there's 2 great sources with literally hundreds to choose from. I love this first one, and it's a website that gathers all of these literature charts together. And they're all in a visual format, which is nice. Now, keep in mind, these do come from 4chan, so you might find some weird stuff at the bottom, but most of them are perfectly reasonable and actually really high quality. I love these because there's so many different categories, and a lot of them will actually give you an order to read them in, or add some helpful context to help you along the way. You've got different genres, different topics, different countries, the top rated books. There's a whole rainbow of categories to explore and to find what you like. I will admit that some are better than others, and others are just piss takes. But overall, it's great fun to look through. For me personally, I'm taking a lot of inspiration from the Greek charts, and they've helped me find books that I can add on to my main reading list and give me some extra context. But seriously, there's something for everyone at all levels of reading. So I'll link it down below, and of course after this video, you can go ham. Before the second source, I'd like to talk about Squarespace and how it's helped me in my projects. Now, the problem was, I knew nothing about web design, and I still don't. But at the same time, I wanted a website. I wanted a place where I could showcase my work, and Squarespace offered me that. Because of how intuitive the customization is, I could throw together a nice looking website within a single evening. And they have this great tool called the Fluid Engine Editor, which lets you be very precise in your design, enough that you can create exactly what you envision in your head. Right now, I use it as a hub for my articles, but I know it can host video collections and even courses too. So it's nice to know I have that flexibility in the future. And best of all, it deals with the technical stuff for you. The email systems, the analytics, the payments. And for a beginner like me, that's a huge relief. So when you want to create your own website, you can go to squarespace.com and use their free trial to design a website. And once you feel ready to launch it, you can then go to squarespace.com/Odysseus and use code Odysseus to get 10% off your first website or domain. My second favorite place for finding book lists is Goodreads. You've probably heard of it already. It's a place for reviewing books, for tracking your progress, and for finding new ones. If you click browse and then go to lists, you find yourself with thousands of collections to explore through. Now that's a lot to go through. So you can narrow down your search by using tags or searching keywords. For example, I know that my Roman history sucks. So if I ever wanted to return to the glory days, I could search Roman history and find myself a decent list that will get me up to speed. I'd have a scroll through them and find the books that stick out to me the most. And suddenly, I have myself a path to the knowledge I want. Some of these lists are small enough to be manageable, but others are crazy long. And of course, you don't have to read them all. It's entirely up to you. But now we get to the juicy part. Maybe there's freedom coursing through your veins, and that's not enough for you. You want to pick up the axe and carve yourself a path. And of course, that brings us to option 2. How can you make your own reading list? How can you craft an experience that's unique to you? A personalized, tailor-fit approach. The easiest way to show you is to just make one myself. And yes, this does take some time to research, but when has wisdom ever come without a cost? And besides that, the initial effort is worth it, because having a plan takes such a big burden off your shoulders. The road ahead is more predictable and more stable. Your first step is to pick a topic or a goal. And most of the time that's easy enough. You just ask yourself, well, what interests me? What do I want to learn more about? Or maybe, what kind of person do I want to be? And which topic is going to help me achieve that? All of these questions can help you narrow in on what your plan should be centered around. For example, you might love history, but you're painfully aware that your knowledge of Eastern history is very limited, and you want to fill that gap with a reading plan. Or maybe you've just finished your final exams and you're on your way to college to study psychology. Now, your tests went well, but maybe you struggled with the research methods. So you want to make a reading plan to help you strengthen that, so it doesn't cause you trouble later on. Or as a final example, maybe you're a new father and you're intimidated because you don't know how to approach parenting or education. So you design yourself a more practical reading plan to help you gain those skills. The options are endless and they also decide. But what if you're thinking, well, what if I don't have any interests in the first place? And that really saddens me to hear, because it's not true. But it is a valid issue, and we'll get to it soon. So first, what if the idea of a precise topic is too strict for you? To say that I'll learn this chunk of history or read this author's novels, maybe that idea is too restrictive to you, and you feel confined. Maybe you want to broaden out and keep the experience a bit more dynamic and fresh. For example, as much as it hurts to say, maybe you think Roman history is boring. But when you hear about the empire's collapse, you think, hold on, now we're cooking. Maybe Roman history introduced you to the idea of why and how empires collapse, and you find that part interesting, and you want to explore why that happens elsewhere. That's a broad aim, because it goes beyond any one time period or topic. To understand that, you have to learn history, you have to learn sociology, economics, anthropology. All of these subjects will answer that question. You have to attack the question from many different angles. And of course, it's nice for some variety. Now let's return to the question of, what if I don't know what to read? And I suffered with this question for a while. I didn't have any agency in what I read, and I remember reading whatever the internet told me to, even if I didn't really care deep down. And it sounds stupid, but it's still so common today. If you got into reading through the self-improvement, self-help kind of wave, then you know that these content creators and influencers, they like to recommend the same 50 to 100 books again and again. And most of them are a business for some reason. But the point is, we almost feel as new readers that is what you have to read to become a reader. That is the curriculum. Now, I'm not against those types of books. Some of them are great, but many readers simply don't care. But they're made to feel like they have to read it because those are the books everyone's reading. It can strip away your freedom and make reading feel like a chore, which is the last thing it should be. So how do you discover your true interests, the ones that come from within you and not some talking head on the internet like me or the next guy? You could go through a discovery phase. Now, I'm taking a wild guess here, but there is a small chance you've taken a gap year in your education at some point. In case you didn't know, a gap year is when you take a break from your current path And you spend a period of time exploring different activities, jobs, volunteering, courses, and you even travel across the world. The idea behind it is to try many different things so that you can better understand who you are and what you want. You can find out what you like, what you don't like, and of course, once you return to your career or your education, you know what matters to you and you're better informed. So why not take that idea and apply it to your reading plan? If you don't know what to get started on, explore. Look around you. You can watch videos that excite you. You can read articles that catch your eye. Or you can just go to a bookstore and see what there is. Now, of course, not everything is going to be exciting to you. But through that discovery, you're going to start to see patterns form in what you like and in what attracts you. It's often unexpected too. So don't worry too much about finding this interest. Chances are it's going to reveal itself to you. For example, in college, I studied ecology, and it was interesting enough. I showed up, I did the work, all good. But then in second year, for this one module, I had this professor who was amazing. He would show up, he would talk about what truly interested him and not necessarily what was on the PowerPoint. He would go off script, he would freestyle, and it was so interesting. And because of him, I was introduced to anthropology, which is now one of my favorite things to read about today. Those few lectures I had with him are my best memory of the course. And it just shows you how unexpected these discoveries can be. But before you take that leap and go on this discovery phase, you might want to consider if it's even necessary in the first place. Now you remember I said that when people say they have no interests, it makes me sad because I don't agree with it. Like, do you genuinely believe that you have zero interests? I don't think so. To truly have no enthusiasm for anything is almost impossible for a living, breathing human. Your interests are in there somewhere, I promise you. Maybe you struggle to take ownership of them, or maybe you overlook them completely, but they are there. For example, I see this happen a lot in bodybuilders and people who are into fitness in general. Many people will talk badly of them and accuse them of being one-dimensional just because they spend a lot of time in the gym and they like to push themselves. Now that's unfair because it's okay to be passionate about something that others deem boring. And in the worst case, these people who are into fitness will start to believe it. They'll start to think that despite how much they love their training, it doesn't really count as an interest. And they might see themselves as boring people. And that is just not true. I had a similar experience when it comes to writing. Many years ago, I would share these informational posts on Instagram, and I'd give them a very long caption describing something I'd learned. And this was just for fun, because I knew that nobody cared to read them, and to be fair, they were pretty awful. But I didn't see it as a hobby or an activity. It was just a part of my weekly life. It was a habit. But if you zoom out and look at it objectively, that's an interest. I like to learn about things, synthesize them, and then share them to the world, whether that's in text or video. That's an interest. So perhaps your interests are already there, but they're so embedded in your character that you just fail to see them. Maybe you're into coffee or whiskey or sewing or football. Any of these deep-rooted habits that are your interests could be a good starting point for your reading plan. Of course, it's not the end-all be-all, but if you don't know where to begin, it could be there. Now comes the research, which is actually how you create the reading plan itself. Now, I'm going to make my own so you can see how it might look in practice. And just to keep it simple, I'm going to pick a pretty basic subject. My knowledge of economics is almost zero because I never did it in school. And whenever people talk about bonds or inflation, I feel stupid because I don't know how they work. So if I were to define my goal for this reading plan, it would be, I want to gain a basic understanding in economics. That's quite general, but remember, you can be as specific as you want. The next thing to decide is how long your reading plan is going to be. Now, I hate to be rushed, so I'm not going to put any deadline on this, but it still helps to have a rough idea of how long it's going to take. The more important thing to consider is, how long does this reading list actually need to be in order to fulfill the goal? If you choose a niche goal, like say, I want to read all of Sophocles' books, or I want to get better at storytelling, you could probably get away with a small reading list. Within 5 to 10 books, you've achieved that goal. On the other hand, if you have a bigger goal, then you probably need a bigger list. You can't tell yourself, I want to become an expert in the study of ethics and then only read 8 books on it. It's going to take a lot more than that to achieve an expert status. For my reading plan, I think I'll keep it medium, longish length. It's only basic economics, and I feel like within 10 or 20 books, I can gain the understanding I need. The next thing to do is to find the books. And because of the internet, you can probably do this in an hour or two. And there's actually 3 great sources that I love to use, and also a logical order to use them in. The first source is easy. It's Google. Now, admittedly, this won't work if you have a very precise goal, but in my case, it's general. And I'm sure many others before me have had the same desire. I look up best economics books for beginners, and it gives me loads of blogs and articles with that exact list. And most of them are helpful enough to even give you some context and advice in approaching them. I make sure to read multiple of these lists so I can see which books keep appearing and which ones did I maybe miss in another article. I like to add all of these books to my own separate list. I write down the title and, of course, the author's name. And don't worry about being too selective at this stage. Just throw in whatever looks good. I know it might seem a bit sloppy and random at first, but don't worry, because in the next 2 steps, we're going to have the chance to refine our choices and get rid of the crappy ones. So here's my first list after the initial round of searching. The next step involves something that I usually despise, especially when it comes to writing, and it's ChatGPT. It may suck the creativity out of art and it may produce crappy writing, but I will admit, when it comes to finding things, it does a good job. It's nice because unlike Google, you can be very precise in your search, and that means even a niche reading topic is made possible. There is a small problem though. AI is stupid. It's only going to give you what you want if you spoon feed it enough information. And that is why it's so important for your search to be well crafted. There's a few things that make a good prompt. First, to be precise. The more details you offer, the better the robot can do its job and give you the result you actually wanted. Second, it's good to give the AI some context. It's good to explain it who you are and what you're trying to do, which in this case is build a reading list. And on top of that, I'll throw in my goals. I'll tell the AI, what am I trying to achieve? What do I want to know by the end of this plan? I also like to ask for a small description of each book so that I have some context to work with. It's these details which make the difference between a boring generic list and one that is actually viable for your goals. I should note though that because my goals are quite general, I didn't feel the need to elaborate on exactly what I wanted to learn. It was more of a case of tell me everything you know rather than I want to learn this and this and this. But if your goals are a bit more precise, then do make sure to mention that. And just a word of warning, I have heard that ChatGPT isn't too great at producing, super long lists. I think past 50 or 60, it starts to get a bit weird. Now for the third stage. This is where you screen your choices, get rid of the weak ones, and arrange it into this clear roadmap to follow. As I said, I like to gather all of these choices and then put them in one place. And I also like to add some helpful context. How difficult are they? What are they about? What are the main topics covered? If you see any of these things, it might be worth noting them down. The books you found on Google will have a human opinion behind them, but the ones from AI don't, and they can be unreliable. You've already seen how we can use Goodreads to find reading lists, but in this case, we're going to use it to find the profile of each book. I like to search each book on the list and read both the description and the reviews. Now, the description is very helpful because it gives you lots of context and it kind of prepares you of what to come. But the reviews are great too because it's nice to hear from real people who have had actual experience with the book. Because the reviewers aren't there to market the book, you can have some faith that they are honest in their review, whether it's good or bad. And it's so nice to have that transparency before you jump in. Reviews can give you a lot of juicy context. You can find out how the author maybe approaches the topic, or what they argue, or how difficult the book is to read. However, one thing I would be cautious of is whether the reviews liked the book or not. Now, of course, they're going to give you a heads up of what's to come and they'll tell you how the book read, but obviously they're going to give their opinion as well. It's incredibly easy to base your whole opinion of the book on a couple of strongly worded, emotionally charged reviews. So I would take them with a grain of salt and maybe even ignore them. Every book has mixed reviews, and at the end of the day, everyone has their own preferences, their own experiences and prejudices too. You might hate what someone else loves, and they might hate what you love. These reviews could be misinformed or straight up lying, and there's no way for you to know. So just keep that in mind. Of course, if a book has a terrible rating and many common complaints in the reviews, that's a different story. So now with the information from Goodreads, you can look at every single book on your list and decide on whether it gets to stay or whether it has to go. Again, feel free to jot down notes on each book so that you can give them a more accurate judgment. And in this step, I am expecting to get rid of books. Maybe by limiting myself to a number, I am forced to get rid of the worst choices and stick to only the best. Maybe the reviews of one book set off alarm bells, or maybe I find out that a book doesn't really align with my goals, so there's no point of keeping it. With Goodreads, you can clean up the past choices and make them serve you the best. And once you cut away all of these bad choices, you're left with this pretty solid, well-researched plan. It's never going to be perfect, of course, but because you took the care in making it, you can be sure that there's no huge disappointments coming. This is my polished reading list, and the bulk of the work is done here. All that's left is to make some tiny final touches. Now I'm going to arrange the books in an order that makes sense to me. And I say one that makes sense to me because there is no formula to go about this, because it all depends on the topic you chose and how your mind works. In my case, I'm learning economics as an absolute beginner. So to me, it makes sense to put the easier books early on and then put the more difficult ones at the end of the list. It's only roughly because I can't be 100% sure of the difficulty, but it's good enough, and that's all that counts. Your order could be totally different. Maybe you have a reading plan that has both non-fiction and fiction, and so you kind of alternate between them just to keep the experience fresh. Or maybe your reading plan is historical, so it makes sense to put it in chronological order, which of course makes sense. Or you could chunk the books together by subtopic. This is your plan, and whatever makes sense in your head is probably the right decision. And now I congratulate you because you are finished. You've done the work. And now comes the fun part, which is where you just buy all the books. You can do them one by one, or if you're feeling like a baller, you get all of them at the same time. It's totally up to you. But before you go and do that, I have some quick-fire tips on how you can succeed in your reading plan and keep it rewarding, even as time goes on. But before that, of course, I'm going to do a shameless plug of the newsletter. On there, you'll get weekly emails on learning, reading, writing, and all these other things relating to a happy, creative life. Things that you might not necessarily see on the channel. So I'd be grateful if you sign up with the link below. It's free, it's not spammy, and I'll see you there. First, remember that with this reading plan, nobody is examining you or forcing you to read on. There's no one watching you over your shoulder. And I hope this doesn't happen, but if a book doesn't align with the goal, or it just kind of sucks, then you can drop it. You can stop reading. There's no need to force yourself to read what doesn't excite you. Life's too short for that. And sometimes sacrificing a book is exactly what you need to keep that momentum up and, most importantly, enjoy the journey. The second tip is to try and gamify the experience as much as possible. Because once you start the reading list, you're going to feel this sense of novelty and excitement. And trust me, that is going to wear off. And it might eventually start to feel like a chore or a slog. But it doesn't have to. There are things you can do to keep the experience rewarding even in the middle of it and towards the end. You can add things to your reading plan that make you feel a sense of progression, like a video game. And that keeps you going even when it gets tough. For example, you could create a checklist that's satisfying to tick off. Or you could write down a set of specific questions that you have. And then as you read through the books, you get a sense of accomplishment as you see the page fill up with the answers. Or you could share your favorite ideas from the books online. You could do reviews or just bullet points even. Anything to make it feel social and fun. And even Goodreads lets you track the page progress of each book you read. It's these small things that make you feel like you're moving forward and give you that sustained momentum. My final tip is that you don't have to be chained down by your reading plan. Now, I use the great works as my plan, of course, but if I'm feeling like I need a break from Greek plays or philosophy, I will do exactly that. I will pause my progress on that list and just read whatever I want. That is how you keep burnout far away and how you keep your progress realistic. Now, I really appreciate you watching the video, and I do hope that gives you what you need to make your own reading plan, one that is exciting and fun to do. I'd seriously love to hear if you are already following a plan or if you have any good ideas for one now. So my emails are open. I read and I respond to everything there actually, so feel free to shoot me a message. And of course, thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring the video and to you for watching.